Hi, everybody. Welcome to the X Factor. My name is Dr. Stephen Long, and this is the podcast for leaders by leaders. Today, I'm here with Max Dezara of Akoya Capital in Chicago. Good morning, Max. How are you today?
Good. I'm fine, Steve. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for agreeing to come on. Why don't you just tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Okay, happy to. It's a pleasure to be here. So thanks. First off, thanks for that. Just by way of background, Akoya Capital is a private investment firm headquartered in Chicago. We focus on the lower end of the middle market, investing in operating companies in the lower end of the middle market. And I'll just take a couple of minutes and provide a little background on a little overview of my background, because I think it'll help provide some context in terms of how we got to where we are.
Sure.
I've actually come to the whole private equity world through a fairly untraditional career path. I started my career originally in a family business. I was fortunate enough to have been exposed to a family business growing up. My father, my dad, was able to pursue the American dream. He, immigrated here from Europe, came here with literally a suitcase full of clothes, a few $100s, tremendous amount of hope, aspiration, and an extraordinary entrepreneurial spirit. And shortly after he immigrated to the States, he started a little business out of our apartment. And over time, that little business became a pretty significant business. And I was really fortunate to have been exposed to that growing up. So my life was sort of predestined. I was going to grow up and go into the family business. I'm the eldest of two younger siblings. So fast forward, I grew up, I went into the family business full time. I spent a couple years in our family business and really decided early on, Steve, that I wanted to do something outside of our family business. I wanted to pursue a career independent of our family business. And I think for me, it was, largely predicated on the fact that I had such a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for what my father had accomplished. I think there was something inside me driving me to prove to myself, and maybe on some level prove to my father, that I could be successful independent of the family business. So I left in my early 20s. I wound up going to work for a very high quality executive search firm in Chicago. And I really enjoyed the work and decided that I wanted to spend the first half of my career in the human capital and talent acquisition, talent assessment field. So at the age of 25, I started an executive recruiting firm in Chicago, and with the extraordinary help of some very, very talented people that was able to attract and develop and retain over time, we built that search firm to one of the largest retained search firms in the country. And then 15 years after I started the company, we were approached by a large strategic acquirer. They were traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Their chairman had raised well in excess of $100 million of equity capital. And his objective was to aggregate the executive search and staffing industry. So they acquired our company in 1998. And as a result of the merger, it literally created what at the time was one of the top 10 retained executive search firms in the world. So we had offices in New York, Chicago, London, Hong Kong, Tokyo, and Singapore. And it was a great opportunity, Steve, for myself and my partners to monetize the equity value that we had created in our business, and a chance to go from a regional and national platform to a global platform, and frankly work with people that I had a tremendous amount of respect for. So my last 10 years in executive search was really focused on serving the private equity practice. So shortly after the merger, I was appointed to lead our global private equity practice. And essentially what that meant was that the clients that we served were operating companies that were owned by large PE firms around the globe. And so we were really, the last 10 years of my career was really centered around recruiting board directors and CEOs and C-level operating executives across a variety of different private equity owned portfolio companies. And that experience just provided a tremendous perspective on the PE landscape, but really from an outside looking in point of view. And I was really drawn to the handful of PE firms that placed a disproportionate amount of value on executing a leader-led strategy, whereby they would, have very, very significant operating executives on the team, pairing them up with their transaction team or their deal team. So, really the strategy was to work with operating executives that had deep domain expertise in the sectors in which they were investing, and leveraging their domain expertise as a way to unlock incremental value. So I was able to see firsthand the impact that strategy had in terms of shareholder value creation. But as I bifurcated the market, what became pretty apparent is that the firms that really leveraged that strategy and successfully implemented that strategy were typically PE firms with well over $1 billion of AUM. So these were really large PE firms. And as you start to work your way to the middle market and then the lower end of the middle market within the private equity community, that strategy was virtually non-existent. So I saw an opportunity to really create a differentiated private investment firm, leveraging a leader-led strategy, leveraging an operationally focused strategy, and really bringing that down to the lower end of the middle market. So I left it on very good terms at the end of 2004, and frankly reinvested a significant amount of the proceeds I earned by selling my search firm, and kind of reinvested those proceeds into building what today is Akoya Capital. And proud to say that we sort of have accomplished a lot of our objectives. So today we're a sector-focused private investment firm. There are really three primary sectors that we invest in. Each one of them is led by an industry icon. So our partners are individuals with decades of extraordinarily deep, relevant operating experience in the industries in which we invest in, and then they're supported by a 5-person transaction team. So, the transaction team are all sort of classically trained private equity professionals, but the model is really the inverse of what you would find at most traditional private equity firms. And by that, I mean the decisions about what we invest in, whom we invest in, how we think about developing a value creation plan and executing that value creation plan is really led by individuals that have decades of operating experience in that industry sector, supported by a transaction team, as opposed to the other way around that you might find in more of a traditional private equity fund. I'd say one other primary distinction, Steve, is that we've made a strategic decision not to raise a captive pool of capital. So in many respects, our group consists of several high net worth individuals. We've all been very fortunate throughout our careers. So we invest a meaningful amount of our own personal capital in each and every investment opportunity. And then we have relationships with several ultra high net worth family offices that we will bring into on a deal by deal basis. So we set up an SPV, a special purpose vehicle for each investment, and then we raise capital on a deal by deal basis, as opposed to aggregating a bunch of capital and then looking to deploy it.
I see. So you've really inverted the model where human capital is driving the investment more so than the financial analytics, if you will.
That's true. Yeah, most PE firms, will look at generating returns through financial leverage and financial engineering. We really look at generating returns through sort of transforming the businesses and taking them to an entirely different level. And that's predicated on having partners who have decades of very deep, relevant experience, having been there and done it before, and bringing that insight and wisdom and expertise to the investment strategy.
Yeah, there's an old saying in football coaching, is that it's not so much about the X's and the O's, it's really about the Johnnies and the Joes. So you can be as creative and tactically correct as you want when you're on the chalkboard, but you got to remember who's that there's actually a person behind each one of those X's and O's. So,
well said.
Yeah. So, all right. So tell me what is the best aspect of being a leader?
Well, I think there's a distinction between, being a leader and being a manager, managing people versus leading people. And my view is, management's about persuading people to do the things that they don't really want to do, while leadership is about inspiring people to do the things they never thought they could do. So I think there's a pretty big distinction there. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things, one of the best attributes of being a leader is the opportunity to develop and mentor and inspire other individuals to achieve their full potential, right? So I think that's a really important element of leadership. I'd say one of the other aspects is, which I find extremely fulfilling relative to what we did at Akoya and other endeavors in my life, is having a strategy, having a vision, sort of seeing what's possible, and then putting together a plan to achieve that goal, and assembling the team to achieve that goal, and then actually executing and having that vision be realized. So going from, if you will, the whiteboard or the thesis all the way through implementation of a concept or an idea.
Okay. So what have you found to be, some of the, primary components of helping leaders maximize their potential?
I think just in my own personal experience, what's been immensely helpful for me is the opportunity that I've been very fortunate, frankly, throughout my career. So I think luck plays a small element here. I've been exposed to some extraordinary people, extraordinarily accomplished people. And it's almost been like a human laboratory. If you think about it, I spent 25 years in the executive search industry. I literally interviewed thousands of candidates. I placed hundreds of C-level executives. And so, the opportunity to see how, individuals have progressed in their career, to understand the attributes, that make somebody successful in their career. And I've been able to emulate those and learn a lot through those experiences. So I've been very, very fortunate that I've been exposed to some incredibly bright, talented, and frankly, some not so bright and talented individuals, right? So, I always sort of amazed when I was back at the search stage. You'd look at a candidate that had all the prep school, Ivy League education, coming out of HBS or coming out of one of the top B schools, graduating the same year that a guy coming out of a state university, right? But then you fast forward 20 years in their career, and the executive that has the undergrad from a state university is running a multi-billion-dollar company, and the individual with the MBA from an Ivy League school is kind of just stuck in middle management, upper middle management, and understanding the attributes and what really led to the success. So I've been very fortunate in that I've had those experiences and exposures to a lot of different people.
Yeah, that's some great insight, because it's those characteristics that do not come across on paper that really define a person. And it's great when you can, put those qualifications together with those intangible characteristics. But in the end, it's still about, performance and execution.
Right.
So, so what do you see as the primary responsibility of leaders?
I think a couple of things. I think first and foremost, it's the focus on selection, retention, and development of talent. It's really, I'm a bit biased, obviously, but it's really about the people and the people that you surround yourself with. And the leaders that I admire the most are the leaders that sort of really check their ego at the door, and don't necessarily need to be the smartest guy in the room, don't necessarily have to have the idea be their idea, that they're really, sort of creating a very safe environment for people to openly speak their mind, kind of get your best input, and ultimately make the best decision based on getting various inputs and various perspectives. So I think those are important attributes. I think the other really key attribute that I think is critically important is a real sense of ownership. That truly the buck stops with the leader, and a recognition that your role is to provide the tools and resources and support to have your people be, and empower your people to be as successful as they can. But at the end of the day, you own the results, and recognizing that that you really do own the results as a leader, and you're accountable for those results.
You know, if you go back to your executive search days, I'm sure you came across, some hiring managers, particularly on the C level, who might have been intimidated by some of the, candidates that you were presenting. And I was wondering, is there a way to get around that, or do you just realize that this is a B guy and he's looking for a C person?
It's really the latter. I mean, there's you can try to coach them, but if someone is really wired that way, if someone is really insecure and not comfortable having people around them that have expertise that they don't have for fear of whatever the fear may be, it's not much you can do about it.
Yeah, that's a shame, because you're really trying to, help the firm grow, but you have this guy at the top who just is not willing to accept talented people around him. And this is where it's a term called water rises to its own level. Is that the organization just won't perform and execute above the level of the competency or incompetency of the leader. So, all right. So what advice would you give to other leaders regarding talent optimization and strategic execution?
Well, as I said, I think putting your ego aside, I think hiring the best people possible for each role is absolutely critical, right? And a willingness to learn with a humble attitude. I think those are some of the key attributes. And then, a recognition and admission that you don't have all the answers as a leader, and that you really ought to create an environment where the best idea wins, irrespective of where that idea came from, right? So not having all the answers, and really seeking input and guidance from others in order to make the best decision. And then a continual focus on learning and growing throughout your career. I'd say those are a couple of the key attributes.
Yeah, just be able to maintain that curiosity. But so how do you see people who are really effective manage that paradox between humility and confidence?
Yeah, there's an interesting balance, right, between strengths and weaknesses, right? So on one hand, you need to be confident, but you can't cross the line and move into the cocky territory, right? You need to be a great leader, but great leaders are also great followers, right? So I found that you've got to be able to balance your strengths and find the equilibrium there, and find the proper balance.
Yeah. Well, I think you're just, you're leading up to a point that I've found consistently, is that people confuse confidence and humility. Is that, well, you can't be both. You're either one or the other. And what I've learned, that's just not true, is that, humility, people who aren't humble are arrogant, and people who aren't confident, hold some self-doubt about them. And so, it basically, they're not on the same line of the spectrum, humility and confidence. Is that you can be humble and self-confident at the same time. And actually, that humility of recognizing that you don't know everything, and that you can, continue to learn and surround yourself with the best people so you can learn from them. Is actually a sign of confidence, is that that you're able to continue to grow.
That's right. Well, I think building on that, not every decision a leader makes is a good decision, right? And we make mistakes, and but being able to acknowledge and admit that you've made a mistake and own up to it, I think, frankly, Steve, it actually increases the respect that others have for that leader, right? So therein lies part of the humility, and I think just sort of checking your ego at the door. What we do at Akoya, which I think is maybe a little different, is we actually celebrate failures, right? So some of my best learning in life have come from mistakes that I've made or failures that I've experienced, and Lord knows we still encounter those continually as you're learning. You're going to continue to make mistakes, and you're going to fail. not achieve all of your stated objectives. And we celebrate those failures, at Akoya. I mean, we'll do a post-mortem. We'll really try to understand, where the key learnings were, what, if anything, could we have improved on, and how do we get better as an organization and as a team. And it's done in a very safe, non-judgmental way. But we are objectively critical of one another, and we push each other. And I think that's an important way to learn and continue to grow.
Yeah, that kind of peer pressure is really effective. But what you're really talking about is resilience, and it's really difficult to demonstrate resilience if you haven't admitted that you failed. And I see that sometimes is that they lack resilience skills, and so therefore they can't admit, or they won't admit that they failed, because then they have no other recourse.
Right.
So. Yeah.
Right.
So,
I think one of the other keys, Steve, is coping. Kind of the ability to cope with stress, because Lord knows a lot of it's coming at leaders in every direction. And if you think about some of the greatest athletes, or you've heard the expression, everything kind of slows down for the great athlete. I mean, some of the quarterbacks, everything, they have happy feet and they kind of panic under pressure, but the best of the best, everything kind of slows down and they're calm and cool and collected. And so I think having the ability to sort of cope with stress and deal with a high level of ambiguity, a tolerance for a high level of ambiguity, I think is another important attribute.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Max, is that, the tolerance for ambiguity and the ability to slow things down under pressure. And I've seen this with great athletes, but also special ops personnel, in the Air Force, as well as fighter pilots, is that it's just counterintuitive to slow things down when you're in the midst of that kind of pressure. But the good news is that it's not something you're born with. Is that we're naturally inclined to freak out when things get a little hairy, right? But people can learn this trait and behave in this way over time. And the people that that you've come in contact with, somehow they've learned it. Whether they picked the right parents, or had a great teacher or great coach somewhere along the way, or just learned it through trial and error, recognizing their own role models. So let me ask you about role models. Who were your leadership role models, and what did you learn from them?
Well, I'd say first and foremost was my father. I was really fortunate to have, again, it gets back to the element of luck. I just was lucky to have been born into that environment and that family and with that particular father. So my dad was clearly an early mentor and role model of mine. I learned integrity. His whole mantra building the entire business was really a kind of focus on the customer experience. And he was just, relentless about ensuring that the customer was satisfied and the customer had a really positive experience. And in his business, it was really interesting because, as I said, I grew up in the business. So my earliest memories in life were working with my dad, but there would be customers that were second generation, in some cases, third generation buyers of our product. So that was an important lesson. Just a certain kind of tenacity and stick-to-itiveness. It's just an unbelievable attribute. So I learned a lot of those core values from my father. And then, as I said, Steve, I've been incredibly fortunate to have been exposed to several incredibly successful individuals, and I've been able to, really learn a lot from their shared experiences. So as you look at Akoya, we have currently about I think 6 different operating partners or sector leaders, and these are literally franchise players in their industries. I mean, these are people who've achieved the highest level of success within their industries, and I'm fortunate enough to work with them day in and day out. And so by osmosis, some of those positive attributes have rubbed off.
Yeah, well, it's I think role models can come into your life at certain times. And if people are just open, to being aware of what other people can offer, I think more people would benefit from more people. And obviously you have this trait. So let me ask you, Max, how do you relax, or how do you celebrate?
Yeah, I'm getting better at relaxing and celebrating. We have no problem celebrating. So as I mentioned, we celebrate not only our successes, but we celebrate our failures. So that's an important part of what's been kind of built into our culture is, and this is also a lesson I learned from my father. I mean, it's literally a stop and smell the roses kind of philosophy, right? So be in the moment, stay present, and kind of enjoy those positive experiences and learn from the negative ones. So that I have no problem celebrating. We do that quite well.
Good.
On the relaxation side, I've been recently in the last couple of years been spending more time hiking, more time in nature. I just spent the entire summer in Park City, Utah.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially hiking every day, mountain biking, fly fishing.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing, right? So, being in nature, I find incredibly nourishing for the soul and the mind.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been spending more time, hiking. I've been spending more time meditating. I'm getting into yoga. So just that's how I find my relaxation and spending, fortunately spending much more quality time with my family now as I have reached a point in my career where I can have a bit more quality and balance of life, spending more time with my family, which is really quite fulfilling.
Well, I got to tell you, Max, it's really heartening to hear you say all that, because one of the things that's coming out of this this COVID pandemic is the need and importance of self-care. So I'm sure all the listeners will just benefit from the way you take care of yourself. So how can people get a hold of you, Max?
So my email address is mdezara, Dezara, at akoyacapital.com. And if anybody would like to reach out, I'll be happy to engage in a conversation, provide any perspective that would be helpful.
Well, Max, it's been great to have you on the X Factor. Thanks so much for agreeing to participate, and good luck with your unique model.
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this morning.
It's certainly our pleasure. So that's it for today, everybody. We'll be back next time with another episode of the X Factor for the podcast for Leaders by Leaders. I'm Dr. Stephen Long. Have a great day.